chapter 21, Warnings on the Journey to Jerusalem. Now it came to pass that when we had departed from them and set sail, running a straight course, we came to Kos. The following day to Rhodes, and from there to Patara. And finding a ship sailing over to Phoenicia, we went aboard and set sail. When we had sighted Cyprus, we passed it on the left, sailed to Syria, and landed at Tyre. For there the ship was to unload her cargo. And finding disciples, we stayed there 7 days. They told Paul through the Spirit not to go up to Jerusalem. When we had come to the end of those days, we departed and went on our way, and they all accompanied us with wives and children, till we were out of the city, and we knelt down on the shore and prayed. And when we had taken our leave of one another, we boarded the ship, and they returned home. And when we had finished our voyage from Tyre, we came to Ptolemais, greeted the brethren, and stayed with them 1 day. And the next day we who were Paul's companions departed and came to Caesarea, and entered the house of Philip the evangelist, who was one of the 7, and stayed with him. Now this man had 4 virgin daughters who prophesied, and as we stayed many days, a certain prophet named Agabus came down from Judea. When we had come to us, he took Paul's belt, bound his own hands and feet, and said, Thus says the Holy Spirit, so shall the Jews of Jerusalem bind the man who owns this belt, and deliver him into the hands of the Gentiles. Now when we heard these things, both we and those from that place pleaded with him not to go up to Jerusalem. Then Paul answered, What do you mean by weeping and breaking my heart? For I am ready not only to be bound, but also to die at Jerusalem for the name of the Lord Jesus. So when he would not be persuaded, we ceased, saying, The will of the Lord be done. Paul urged to make peace. And after those days we packed and went up to Jerusalem. Also some of the disciples from Caesarea went with us, and brought with them a certain Mnason of Cyprus, an early disciple, with whom we were to lodge. The Gospel from Jerusalem to Rome. Acts presents Rome as the guardian of law and order, a situation which often worked to the advantage of Paul and the Gospel. Christians were expected to observe Roman law and not to get involved in disorderly, suspicious, or treasonous activity. The Romans, for their part, recognized Christianity as a legal and valid religion with the right to exist. Paul's Roman citizenship granted him certain privileges as well as protection from Jewish fanaticism. His defense before the Roman governors, Felix and Festus, as well as his specific appeal to plead his case before Caesar, are examples of Roman civil and legal law protecting Christianity. The final chapters of Acts portray Paul as a witness for Jesus Christ on trial for the gospel. He defends himself before a Jerusalem crowd, before Felix, and before King Agrippa. He was not found guilty of any crime by the Romans, but they kept him in prison to satisfy the Jews. In the view of the author of Acts, God used Paul's imprisonment to bring him to Rome, the heart of the world, and to make him a witness there. Paul's appearance in Rome was ironic because he came as a prisoner and not as a missionary. In a Roman house, he was held in confinement awaiting a trial that apparently never took place. Transition: Paul arrested in the temple. After arriving in Jerusalem, Paul went to James, the brother of Jesus, and to the elders, telling them about his work among the Gentiles. The leaders of the church rejoiced over the conversion of Gentiles, but they were worried about Jewish hostility. Rumors were circulating that Paul had taught Jews living outside of Palestine not to keep the Jewish law. To avoid a dispute, Paul was urged to join with 4 men who had taken a Nazirite vow. By accompanying them to the temple and paying the expenses of the sacrificial offering, Paul would demonstrate that as a Jew he was keeping the law despite his witnessing to Gentiles. Paul was also accused of profaning the temple by bringing a Gentile into its inner courts. Gentiles were allowed in the outer court, called appropriately the court of the Gentiles, but they were forbidden to come into the court of women or the court of Israel. Signs warned the Gentiles entering these courts would be put to death. Though Paul had not brought Gentiles into the temple, accusations of such led to an attack against him. The mob stopped beating Paul only because the Roman soldiers intervened to save his life. Now, the book of Acts, chapter 21, 17. And when we had come to Jerusalem, the brethren received us gladly. On the following day, Paul went in with us to James, and all the elders were present. When we had greeted them, he told in detail those things which God had done among the Gentiles through his ministry. And when they heard it, they glorified the Lord. And they said to him, "You see, brother, how many myriads of Jews there are who have believed, and they are all zealous for the law. But they have been informed about you that you teach all the Jews who are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, saying that they ought not to circumcise their children, nor to walk according to the customs. What then? The assembly must certainly meet, for they will hear that you have come. Therefore, do what we will tell you. We have 4 men who have taken a vow. Take them and be purified with them, and pay their expenses so that they may shave their heads, and that all may know that those things of which they were informed concerning you are nothing, but that you yourself also walk orderly and keep the law. But concerning the Gentiles who believe, we've written and decided that they should observe no such thing, except that they should keep themselves from things offered to idols, from blood, from things strangled, and from sexual immorality." Arrested in the temple. Then Paul took the men, and the next day, having been purified with them, entered the temple to announce the expiration of the days of purification, at which time an offering should be made for each one of them. Now when the 7 days were almost ended, the Jews from Asia, seeing him in the temple, stirred up the whole crowd and laid hands on him, crying out, "Man of Israel, help! This is the man who teaches all men everywhere against the people, the law, and this place. And furthermore, he also brought Greeks into the temple and has defiled this holy place." For they had previously seen Trophimus the Ephesian with him in the city, whom they supposed that Paul had brought into the temple. And all the city was disturbed, and the people ran together, seized Paul, and dragged him out of the temple, and immediately the doors were shut. Now as they were seeking to kill him, news came to the commander of the garrison that all Jerusalem was in an uproar. He immediately took soldiers and centurions and ran down to them. And when they saw the commander and the soldiers, they stopped beating Paul. Then the commander came near and took him and commanded him to be bound with the 2 chains, and he asked who he was and what he had done. And some among the multitude cried one thing and some another. So when he could not ascertain the truth because of the tumult, he commanded him to be taken into the barracks. When he reached the stairs, he had to be carried by the soldiers because of the violence of the mob. For the multitude of the people followed after, crying out, "Away with him!" addressing the Jerusalem mob. Then as Paul was about to be led into the barracks, he said to the commander, "May I speak to you?" He replied, "Can you speak Greek? Are you not the Egyptian who some time ago stirred up a rebellion and led the 4,000 assassins out into the wilderness?" But Paul said, "I'm a Jew from Tarsus in Cilicia, a citizen of no mean city, and I implore you, permit me to speak to the people." So when he had given him permission, Paul stood on the stairs and motioned with his hand to the people. And when there was a great silence, he spoke to them in the Hebrew language, saying, "Rabbi Gamaliel, Paul's teacher." Gamaliel was a leading Pharisee and a member of the Jewish Sanhedrin in the New Testament period. As a rabbi, he was well known for his ability to interpret the Torah, having the respect of all the people. According to one tradition, he was the disciple of the famous Rabbi Hillel, whose rabbinical school he represented. Yet another tradition knew Gamaliel to be Hillel's grandson. Later, Jewish sources applauded Gamaliel for upholding the purity of the law, Torah, and for maintaining its dietary regulations. In other matters, though he is reported to have held liberal views concerning divorce, keeping the Sabbath, and accepting the Targums, Jewish commentary upon the Torah, this more liberal side of Gamaliel is consistent with his counseling of the Sanhedrin, as Luke relates in Acts. When the Sanhedrin would have killed Peter and some of the apostles, Gamaliel rose to urge a wait-and-see attitude. The council should let God take care of misguided radicals like the apostles, Gamaliel advised. Paul claimed to have been a disciple of Gamaliel, brought up or instructed at the rabbi's feet. In one sense, though, Paul, the disciple, did not follow in his teacher's steps. While Gamaliel had urged Gamaliel advised. Paul claimed to have been a disciple of Gamaliel, brought up or instructed at the rabbi's feet. In one sense, though, Paul the disciple did not follow in his teacher's steps. While Gamaliel had urged restraint in dealing with Jesus' followers, Paul persecuted them zealously until his conversion. Now, chapter 22. Brethren and fathers, hear my defense before you now. And when they heard that he spoke to them in the Hebrew language, they kept all the more silent. Then he said, I am indeed a Jew, born in Tarsus of Cilicia, but brought up in this city at the feet of Gamaliel, taught according to the strictness of our father's law, and was zealous toward God as you all are today. I persecuted this way to the death, binding and delivering into prisons both men and women, as also the high priest bears me witness, and all the council of the elders, from whom I also received letters to the brethren. I went to Damascus to bring in chains even those who were there to Jerusalem to be punished. Now it happened as I journeyed and came near Damascus at about noon, suddenly a great light from heaven shone around me, and I fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to me, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? So I answered, Who are you, Lord? And he said to me, I am Jesus of Nazareth, whom you are persecuting. And those who were with me indeed saw the light and were afraid, but they did not hear the voice of him who spoke to me. So I said, What shall I do, Lord? And the Lord said to me, Arise and go into Damascus, and there you will be told all things which are appointed for you to do. And since I could not see for the glory of that light, being led by the hand of those who were with me, I came into Damascus. Then a certain Ananias, a devout man according to the law, having a good testimony with all the Jews who dwelt there, came to me, and he stood and said to me, Brother Saul, receive your sight. And at that same hour I looked up at him. Then he said, The God of our fathers has chosen you that you should know his will, and see the just one, and hear the voice of his mouth. For you will be his witness to all men of what you have seen and heard. And now why are you waiting? Arise and be baptized and wash away your sins, calling on the name of the Lord. Now it happened, when I returned to Jerusalem and was praying in the temple, that I was in a trance and saw him saying to me, Make haste and get out of Jerusalem quickly, for they will not receive your testimony concerning me. So I said, Lord, they know that in every synagogue I imprisoned and beat those who believe on you. And when the blood of your martyr Stephen was shed, I also was standing by, consenting to his death and guarding the clothes of those who were killing him. Then he said to me, Depart, for I will send you far from here to the Gentiles. Paul's Roman citizenship. And they listened to him until this word, and then they raised their voices and said, Away with such a fellow from the earth, for he is not fit to live. Then as they cried out and tore off their clothes and threw dust into the air, the commander ordered him to be brought into the barracks and said that he should be examined under scourging, so that he might know where they shouted so against him. And as they bound him with the thongs, Paul said to the centurion who stood by, Is it lawful for you to scourge a man who is a Roman and uncondemned? When the centurion heard that, he went and told the commander, saying, Take care of what you do, for this man is a Roman. Then the commander came and said to him, Tell me, are you a Roman? He said, Yes. The commander answered, With a large sum I obtained this citizenship. And Paul said, But I was born a citizen. Then immediately those who were about to examine him withdrew from him, and the commander was also afraid after he found out that he was a Roman, and because he had bound him. The Sanhedrin divided. The next day, because he wanted to know for certain why he was accused by the Jews, he released him from his bonds and commanded the chief priests and all their council to appear, and brought Paul down and set him before them. Chapter 23. Then Paul, looking earnestly at the council, said, Men and brethren, I have lived in all good conscience before God until this day. And the high priest Ananias commanded those who stood by him to strike him on the mouth. Then Paul said to him, God will strike you, you whitewashed wall. For you sit to judge me according to the law, and do you command me to be struck contrary to the law? And those who stood by said, Do you revile God's high priest? Then Paul said, I did not know, brethren, that he was the high priest, for it is written, You shall not speak evil of a ruler of your people. Then Paul said, I did not know, brethren. But when Paul perceived that one part were Sadducees and the other Pharisees, he cried out in the council, Men and brethren, I am a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee. Concerning the hope and resurrection of the dead, I am being judged. And when he had said this, a dissension arose between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. For Sadducees say that there is no resurrection and no angel or spirit, but the Pharisees confess both. Then there arose a loud outcry, And the scribes of the Pharisees' party arose and protested, saying, "We find no evil in this man, but if a spirit or an angel has spoken to him, let us not fight against God." Now when there arose a great dissension, the commander, fearing lest Paul might be pulled to pieces by them, commanded the soldiers to go down and take him by force from among them and bring him into the barracks. The plot against Paul. But the following night the Lord stood by him and said, "Be of good cheer, Paul, for as you have testified for me in Jerusalem, so you must also bear witness at Rome." And when it was day, some of the Jews banded together and bound themselves under an oath, saying that they would neither eat nor drink till they had killed Paul. Now there were more than 40 who had formed this conspiracy. They came to the chief priests and elders and said, "We've bound ourselves under a great oath that we will eat nothing until we have killed Paul. Now you, therefore, together with the council, suggest to the commander that he be brought down to you tomorrow, as though you were going to make further inquiries concerning him. But we are ready to kill him before he comes near." So when Paul's sister's son heard of their ambush, he went and entered the barracks and told Paul. Then Paul called one of the centurions to him and said, "Take this young man to the commander, for he has something to tell him." So he took him and brought him to the commander and said, "Paul the prisoner called me to him and asked me to bring this young man to you. He has something to say to you." Then the commander took him by the hand, went aside, and asked privately, "What is it that you have to tell me?" And he said, "The Jews have agreed to ask that you bring Paul down to the council tomorrow, as though they were going to inquire more fully about him. But do not yield to them, for more than 40 of them lie in wait for him, men who have bound themselves by an oath that they will neither eat nor drink till they have killed him. And now they are ready, waiting for the promise from you." So the commander let the young man depart and commended him. "Tell no one that you have revealed these things to me." Before the governor at Caesarea. The seaport of Caesarea on the Mediterranean coast was first founded as a trading station by the Sidonian king Strato in the 4th century BC. It was subsequently occupied by the Ptolemies and Hasmoneans, among others, and eventually made into a fortified port city with an expanded harbor. But it is Herod the Great who is known as the builder of the city. Caesarea was in a ruined state when Herod began building operations in 22 BC. His dream was to have an international port built in a Roman provincial style that would challenge Egypt's Alexandria as the leading trading center in the eastern Mediterranean. The city was completed in about a dozen years, according to the Jewish historian Josephus, our primary source of information about Herod's Caesarea. It was an engineering wonder with many unique features. The builders used a siltation system and made use of hydraulic concrete poured into the sea as liquid but hardened underwater. The harbor complex was the most elaborate of its day. After Herod's time, the Roman procurators made Caesarea the official seat of rule. During Jesus' time, Pontius Pilate governed Judea from Caesarea, and archaeologists have discovered a fragment of an inscription bearing Pilate's name at the theater there. Antonius Felix was the procurator or governor ruling at Caesarea between AD 52 and 59, which explains why Paul the prisoner was taken there to stand before him. Transition: Paul escorted to Caesarea. Citizens of Rome had special privileges, including freedom from punishment until they had been tried and convicted. Because Paul had appealed for protection and a legal hearing under his rights as a Roman citizen, he was conducted by a military contingent to the governor's residence in the port city of Caesarea. Paul received an initial hearing before the Roman governor Antonius Felix within a week of arriving. But Felix declined to issue a ruling in the case. Even 2 years later, probably in July of AD 59, Paul's case still awaited adjudication. Felix was succeeded as governor by Porcius Festus at that time. Acts chapter 23, sent to Felix. And he called for 2 centurions, saying, "Prepare 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, and 200 spearmen to go to Caesarea at the 3rd hour of the night, and provide mounts to set Paul on, and bring him safely to Felix the governor." He wrote a letter in the following manner. Claudius Lysias, to the most excellent governor Felix, greetings. This man was seized by the Jews and was about to be killed by them. Coming with the troops, I rescued him, having learned that he was a Roman. And when I wanted to know the reason they accused him, I brought him before their council. I found out that he was accused concerning questions of their law, but had nothing charged against him deserving of death or chains. And when it was told me that the Jews lay in wait for the man, I sent him immediately to you, and also commanded his accusers to state before you the charges against him. Farewell. Then the soldiers, as they were commanded, took Paul and brought him by night to Antipatris. The next day they left the horsemen to go on with him and returned to the barracks. When they came to Caesarea and had delivered the letter to the governor, they also presented Paul to him. And when the governor had read it, he asked what province he was from. And when he understood that he was from Cilicia, he said, "I will hear you when your accusers also have come." And he commanded him to be kept in Herod's praetorium. Chapters 24, accused of sedition. Now after 5 days, Ananias the high priest came down with the elders and a certain orator named Tertullus. These gave evidence to the governor against Paul. And when he was called upon, Tertullus began his accusation, saying, "Seeing that through you we enjoy great peace, and prosperity is being brought to this nation by your foresight, we accept it always and in all places, most noble Felix, with all thankfulness. Nevertheless, not to be tedious to you any further, I beg you to hear by your courtesy a few words from us. For we have found this man a plague, a creator of dissension among all the Jews throughout the world, and the ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. He even tried to profane the temple, and we seized him and wanted to judge him according to our law. But the commander Lysias came by and with great violence took him out of our hands, commanding his accusers to come to you. By examining him yourself, you may ascertain all these things of which we accuse him. And the Jews also assented, maintaining that these things were so. The defense before Felix. Then Paul, after the governor had nodded to him to speak, answered, Inasmuch as I know that you have been for many years a judge of this nation, I do the more cheerfully answer for myself, because you may ascertain that it is no more than 12 days since I went up to Jerusalem to worship. And they neither found me in the temple disputing with anyone, nor inciting the crowd, either in the synagogues or in the city. Nor can they prove the things of which they now accuse me. But this I confess to you, that according to the way which they call a sect, so I worship the God of my fathers, believing all things which are written in the law and in the prophets. I have hope in God, which they themselves also accept, that there will be a resurrection of the dead, both of the just and the unjust. This being so, I myself always strive to have a conscience without offense toward God and men. Now, after many years, I came to bring alms and offerings to my nation, in the midst of which some Jews from Asia found me purified in the temple, neither with a mob nor with a tumult. They ought to have been here before you to object if they had anything against me. Or else let those who are here themselves say, if they found any wrongdoing in me while I stood before the council, unless it is for this one statement which I cried out, standing among them, concerning the resurrection of the dead, I am being judged by you this day. Felix procrastinates. But when Felix heard these things, having more accurate knowledge of the way, he adjourned the proceedings and said, when Lysias, the commander, comes down, I will make a decision on your case. So he commanded the centurion to keep Paul and to let him have liberty, and told him not to forbid any of his friends to provide for or visit him. And after some days, when Felix came with his wife Drusilla, who was Jewish, he sent for Paul and heard him concerning the faith in Christ. Now, as he reasoned about righteousness, self-control, and the judgment to come, Felix was afraid and answered, go away for now. When I have a convenient time, I will call for you. Meanwhile, he also hoped that money would be given him by Paul, that he might release him. Therefore, he sent for him more often and conversed with him. But after 2 years, Porcius Festus succeeded Felix, and Felix, wanting to do the Jews a favor, left Paul bound. When did Festus take office? Acts 24:27. Luke comments in Acts on a transfer of power that occurred while Paul was held in prison. The Roman procurator or governor of Judea, Antonius Felix, was replaced by Porcius Festus. The new procurator faced the situation left by Felix. Paul had been detained in prison while Felix dealt with other matters. Now, Festus would need to hear Paul's case and decide whether to grant him passage to Rome for trial. The Jewish historian Josephus had a high regard for Festus, whom he contrasted with Felix, Festus' predecessor. Just when Festus succeeded Felix as procurator is not exactly known. Both Josephus and Luke claim that he followed Felix. Josephus further says that Festus died 4 years before the Jewish war against Rome, which began in AD 66, thus making it AD 62 when Festus was succeeded by the next procurator, Albinus. But when Festus first took office and judged Paul's case is not as easy to determine. One later source, Jerome's Latin version of Eusebius, claims that Festus took office in the Emperor Nero's second year, that is AD 56. Complicating this date, though, is Josephus' statement that the previous procurator Felix received support from his brother Pallas when Felix left office and returned to Rome. Pallas lost his own position as financial secretary in AD 55, making it questionable whether he could have helped his brother after that time. Festus then would have taken office by AD 55. The information regarding when Felix left office and Festus took over simply prevents any definite date from being established. Pallas is described as extremely wealthy by two Roman historians, Tacitus and Dio Cassius. So even after he was no longer financial secretary, his wealth would have allowed him to help his brother Felix. It is also known that Felix was in office in AD 53 and ruled for many years, and Josephus writes considerably of Felix's time in office. While a specific year remains unsettled, most scholars suggest that Festus succeeded Felix around AD 59, ruling until his death in AD 62. Well, this is the end of the Bible reading today. Thanks for joining me. Have a great day. God bless you, and see you tomorrow.